We need, Frank, you want?
Oh yeah, yeah. So we're gonna go over a few things today. One of the first things that we'll be talking about is just using the right words and terminology. Some of this may be super basic for you guys. Some of it may be new. So just bear with us, and hopefully you'll learn something there.
Okay, it's also about knowing the law, what the law is about LGBTQ, the regulations, rules, and also just good practice in the classrooms.
Yeah, and so another part of this, I think the reason that that Aaron asked us to do this was because we kind of have our own perspective in this and our own stories. As far as our experience, going through school and everything. And so that's going to be kind of another component of this.
Yeah. It's also about being supportive to the students and to each other and to your colleagues. We have some, on some of the slides, we have some resources, and I believe Aaron's going to share this slideshow with you at the end of this, so that you can link to resources such as book lists for children of various ages, and other support for teachers.
Okay, so we'll kind of establish some general ground rules here. The first being, please ask questions. And I would encourage you to feel free to, if there's, whenever there's an opening, to go ahead and ask those questions, because I would hate for you to have something pop into your head that you had a question about, and then you wait and then you can't remember what it was. We don't want anyone to leave here with questions. And then the other thing is too, this is a safe space. This is a place where people can ask questions, can express their concerns or their thoughts on what we're talking about. And that's and that's great. That's what we're striving for here. Some of these topics, we're talking about things like gender and sexuality, might make you uncomfortable, and that's fine. We would like just ask you to recognize those feelings and try and push your boundaries a little bit. And as always, hey, if you need to take a break, go for it. We absolutely encourage that.
Okay, here's a little bit of a question. Suppose you needed to divide your class in half for a work project or activity. Think about how you would do that. Is there more than one way? You might want to write down how you would split the students. What would your reason be for doing it that way? Can anybody want to just jump in?
I think it would depend on the task.
Okay. How would you divide? You need to divide it in half for, say, a science project. How would you do that? How would you make the choices?
I would probably try to have mixed abilities and skills and levels on each team, and try to keep toxic relationships apart.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, there are probably several. Thank you for sharing. There are probably several ways to do it. I mean, when I was in school, they would split the boys on one side and the girls on the other without any thought to anything. Or they would take the 4 rows of students and just say, okay, the ones on these 2 rows go here and the ones on those 2 rows go there. It's interesting how people look at their students or anyone in a meeting or a group, how you sort them out. If you let the kids call out their own groups, is that always usable? Is that always an active? No. Why?
Because they choose their friends and there are people who are excluded.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Well, let's think about that activity as we go on through this, and just think about how groups get divided and how thoughts and ideas get split into groups. Okay. Aaron?
Coming. Hold on. I got out of that other meeting, so now my attention's on you.
We need Kahoot.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Oh, I forgot the screen share. I'm there on the site myself, but that's not going to help you.
I just stopped sharing, so it's your turn.
Okay. All right, I think everybody knows how to play Kahoot. So
Okay.
grab your phone if you can. If you're not, then just watch along as we do it with us. But what you'll see is that once people are in, oh, where did I put my phone? Oh, I'm gonna use this computer. Once people are in, you'll see the questions pop up on the screen, and then you'll answer with the corresponding color. Oh no, I just want to go Kahoot it, don't I? Four, 3, 6, 3, 2, 8, 4.
Okay. You've got 4 people signed. Well, I'm one of them, but 3 others are signed on. Everybody else signed on yet?
All right. Do we have everybody who wants to play? All right, we're gonna go for it.
Okay, feel free to ask questions while we're going through this. Just pop right up.
Okay, so you're looking on the screen and then you're answering the color that answers the question. What is cisgender?
Okay, girls, out.
Oh, everybody got that.
Hey, we're starting in a really good place. So
All right.
yeah, like cisgender is just probably most of the people in this call right now.
Okay, you ready for the next question?
Sure. I had to go throw the dogs out of the room.
They wanted to play too, Jenny.
Well, they do, and I'm home alone, so.
Yeah.
Okay, heterosexual. Attracted to a different gender or attracted to the same gender?
I know I got that one wrong. I made a goof.
That happened.
That's okay. We are here to learn. It's okay.
Feminine identifying people who are attracted to other feminine identifying people.
Oh, we're doing pretty well so far.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. People who are attracted to people of 2 or more genders. Reba, you can stay out.
I hope you're talking to your dog.
I am talking to my dog.
Oh, we're getting this.
There we go.
See, guys, I'm learning. See, before I met you guys, I think I would have gotten a couple of those wrong.
Yeah.
An umbrella.
Umbrella term describing someone whose gender identity does not match that which was assigned at birth.
I already have some questions on terminology. Should I ask or save them for the end?
No, ask.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. I just always assumed that so I might refer to somebody that was bisexual or lesbian as also being gay, like that was just a blanket term. Is that incorrect?
It's not necessarily incorrect. A lot of people use that as kind of a blanket term. So like I'll even use that for myself sometimes. Kind of a, kind of a broad definition, but it kind of depends on how people choose to identify. But yeah,
okay. So it's not necessarily wrong. It's more like the others were just the better answer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Just making sure.
So maybe this is going to come up in another question, but I think regarding Andrea's question, gay is maybe not specifically for men, but that is the term for men.
Yeah, so I mean, we can get into this a little bit more later. Gay and lesbian can kind of be used interchangeably sometimes, but so typically, like, gay will often apply to both gay men and gay women, whereas lesbian is pretty exclusively women. The reason for that is kind of beyond me, honestly, but it's the nuances of language.
Okay. Are we ready for the next question?
Yes.
You want to read that off, Jenny? I can't read it because I have too many things covering my screen.
Masculine identifying people who are attracted to other masculine identifying people.
Uh-huh.
I was waiting for it to come up on top.
Masculine.
There you go.
True or false? There are two genders.
There are only two
genders. I got too many things covering my screen.
That's okay. Hey, there you go. We were hoping that would trip someone up, but you all are doing too good for us.
Absolutely. You're doing very well. Okay, next. Yeah, here we go. Sexual and romantic orientation are interchangeable.
Does that mean the terms are interchangeable?
Yes. Yeah, meaning they're basically the same thing.
I misunderstood the question.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. It was worded kind of strangely. Yeah, basically what we were trying to get at was, are sexual and romantic orientation the same thing? So they are not, as it turns out. They are two different things.
Okay, the next one is intersex people are extremely uncommon. True or false?
So interesting thing here, and we'll talk more about what an intersex person is, or a person with an intersex variation is. But as it turns out, intersex variations are about as common as red hair. So there are about as many people with intersex variations as there are redheads in the world. So it's actually relatively common.
Okay. Asexual people face discrimination in the same way as other members of the LGBTQ community. True or false?
Oh, asexual. Ooh.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. There's kind of a misconception that asexual people, otherwise known as ace people, don't face discrimination as other members of the LGBTQ community do. When in reality, they certainly do. You know, there's a lot of pressure on people to expect to be interested in sex and expect to be interested in you know, those sorts of relationships, and asexual people aren't. And you know, that's kind of an interesting thing that you know, they do face discrimination just in their own kind of, you know, in a particular way.
Okay. Bisexual individuals cannot be in heterosexual relationships. True or false? That was a good hit.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's the last question. So
Okay, you can steal that screen back from me.
I'll take it right back. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. So, all right. Here's the tricky
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be a whole lot going on in this graphic, and different people have used different kind of visualizations of this. I had kind of learned these concepts, you know, on the genderbread person, but I've also seen the gender unicorn, and there's all sorts of things. So basically, this graphic is kind of talking about 4 different concepts: gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and then sexual and romantic attraction. So when we're talking about gender identity, the important thing to remember is that is a person's conception of who they are. So, you know, for example, I identify as a woman. That's my gender identity. I'm a trans woman. That's how I identify myself. And the really interesting thing to know about gender and gender identity is that it exists on a spectrum, or kind of a gradient or whatever, where you know, you can be a very feminine person, you can be a very masculine person, you know, you can be somewhere in between, a mix of the two, neither. You know, you have there are as many different gender identities as there are humans on the planet, and it's very varied, but it's ultimately how we identify ourselves, you know, internally. Gender expression is just how we express that part of ourselves to the world, and these things get coded kind of feminine, masculine, whatever, but there's no objective reason that those labels have to be as they are. You know, we use those labels in ways that feel comfortable to us, you know, in ways that work for, you know, for expressing ourselves authentically. So, you know, that's just, if gender identity is what's on, you know, going on in your head, gender expression is kind of what you're portraying to the world, what you're putting out there. You know, and they use some different terms here like butch or femme or androgynous or gender neutral. And those are all just kind of different ways of getting at similar concepts, right? And, you know, we had that question about, well, there are only 2 genders, you know, true or false? Well, is false, because like I said, gender, in the same way as sex, and I'll talk about sex in a moment, exists on, I believe they call it a bimodal distribution, where you have people tend to cluster in two different spots. You can think of them as kind of little hills, right? So, most people are going to cluster in man, woman, and then you're going to have fewer people in between, or at different places. But they exist all along the spectrum. So there are a lot of ways to be here. In the same way, biological sex, we think of it as being a very binary thing, male and female. That's it. When you're born, the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl. But though we're finding out that those concepts really are a little more fluid than we had previously conceived of them as. Assigned sex at birth is done entirely based on a doctor looking at the baby's genitalia. That's it. They're not doing a chromosome test. They're not testing hormones. None of that. It is entirely a visual thing. And so, we had that question about intersex people, and intersex people have some sort of variation that makes them not fit cleanly into that male-female binary. They may have ambiguous genitalia, they may have a chromosomal variation that isn't XX or XY, or is not what is expected. There's a lot of different variations that are possible there. So it's not just male or female. It's really, you may have any number of characteristics that are generally associated with being male or generally associated with being female, but those are kind of arbitrary distinctions that we have drawn as people, because that's one of the things that we do as societies. We make these dividing lines for our own purposes. And then finally, there's sexual and romantic attraction. So sexual attraction is pretty obvious, right? It's who you're attracted to sexually speaking. And we have both, and as we know, like as with our other concepts that I've talked about, these things exist along a spectrum too. So I may be a woman who's mostly interested in women, but occasionally I'm interested in dating men too. And I might use the term lesbian for myself, even though, maybe it's more of a bisexual thing. Again, it's all kind of up to the individual to identify themselves, to define themselves. So, we made the point about sexual and romantic attraction being different. Sexual attraction being what we just talked about. Romantic attraction is simply that. That's who you're interested in being in a romantic relationship with. And that might not be the same people that you're interested in being in a sexual relationship with. So a lot of times those things do line up, but not always. So I like this conception of these concepts, because it kind of makes it visual and kind of puts it in a way that's pretty easy to understand. So just to review real quickly, gender identity is how you see yourself in your head. Expression is how you're showing that to the world. Biological sex is a number of different things. It's parts, it's chromosomes, it's hormones, it's a lot of different things, and again, exists along a spectrum. And then there's sexual and romantic attraction that we talked about. So that is the quick and dirty gender and sexuality 101, everything you always wanted to know but were afraid to ask. That's basically it. I could give a graduate seminar on this probably, but that's basically what our conception of the gender and sexuality spectrums.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I know I threw a ton of information at people, so.
Yeah, that was fast. Nothing? Okay. All right, we'll move on.
Like, how young would you say? Like, does age make a difference? I guess is the better question.
Yeah. So you're talking about as far as like gender and sexuality, like when kids are starting to become aware of that?
Well, not yeah, and so like I had that question, but then I also have the question of, can it shift throughout your life, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. So I know at least I'll speak to the gender side of it. The kind of the consensus among the psychological community and the medical community is that children start to develop a pretty strong sense of their gender identity around age 3 or 4. You often have kids, now that the language for it is out there as far as, transgender issues are concerned, very young, making an assertion, I'm a girl or I'm a boy, even though that's not what they were assigned at birth. So that starts to happen pretty quickly, and I think Ginny will maybe speak to the sexual orientation part of it a little bit more, but I think kids start to get a sense of who they're attracted to relatively early. I don't know what thoughts you have about that, Ginny.
Yeah, everything that Frankie said plus. Yes, children seem to have a budding sense of womanness and manness, or feminineness and masculinity, at age 2 or 3. The standard so far, the norm, is to dress little girls in dresses and little boys in pants. But children will, if left alone, make their own choices. We had in the school I was working in, we had several children in the preschool who were already fairly sure of who they were. It was very interesting. And in terms of fluidity, yes, sometimes they would be a more feminine expression for 2 or 3 years and then flip into a more masculine. It is really interesting to watch children who are not directed toward being female or masculine, feminine or masculine, I should say, be specific, develop that sense.
Jenny,
yes.
could I ask a question?
Sure.
So how could you give examples of, I mean, I have my own ideas in my head about it, but I'd be curious to hear what your experiences are with younger children and ways that you would consider them expressing their gender, like what you would observe in a preschool setting.
Well, since I worked in a school that had a preschool for 23 years, I have seen quite a few kids. We had 100 kids almost every year, 100 preschoolers. And we had kids come in who, some of the very experienced teachers could almost tell from the beginning, from a 3-year-old, whether a child was in line with their assigned biological sex or not, or assigned their gender identity. We had well, let's see, we had a little boy who was at age 3 and 4 would wear nothing but dresses. He insisted on wearing dresses. And his parents were okay with that. They came in and read a story, Jacob's Dress, I can't remember the name of the book. They were and his hair was long and he wore pink coats. And then and that was one example. We had other children who only wanted to play in the kitchen area, in the home area. Unfortunately, one of those children had a father who was extremely adamant that his child would only play in blocks and with the trucks and trains. it was very difficult to have parent conferences sometimes. I don't know of, we had several kids who you would normally used to be called tomboys, very rough and ready girls, who grew up to be very active, physically active, and a couple of them ended up being lesbians. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I guess I'm just, it's always interesting to me, like the idea of, well, what we as society considers feminine versus what we as society consider masculine, versus the feeling of, like, for instance, like, say, like sometimes when I get dressed up or I feel like I'm, going out or whatever, like I'll put on, like a blazer and jeans, and like I don't really necessarily dress in like a feminine way, but I wouldn't necessarily, like, I'd almost say that it pushes more of like a masculine style sometimes, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I identify as being masculine, I guess. So I'm thinking like, so a little boy, like I'm 100% like little boys play with dolls, little girls, go learn how to, fix your car or whatever, but I guess the confusion for me and understanding is like, well, how much of this is what society has said is right or wrong, or is masculine or feminine, and how much is it like their particular feeling inside of I'm male or I'm female, not just the way that they play or I guess.
So that's a really interesting point you make, is like, of course that's changing considerably, like how we conceive of like where our ideas of what is masculine, what is feminine are expanding in a lot of ways, and I think that's good. But it can also be one of those things where I know this is something that I struggle with personally. I am a trans woman myself, and I struggle with, okay, I want to express to the world, my feminine identity, that's who I am. But, how women express that has changed considerably, right? So it's going to be like, I like to wear dresses, I like to do makeup, whatever. But that's not even what a lot of cisgender women are doing, and so trying to fit in that way is tricky. We had a hand up.
Deb.
Yeah, I did. So I'm so glad Jenny described those students, because I am an early childhood education teacher, and I have seen those students in pre-K. But my question is more, there, in fact, one last year student who did the things that you were describing. Always, he came to school dressed like a boy, but then during dramatic play would always put on the dresses and the tiaras and want to do girl stuff, and his parents were aware of it but split on it. The mother was kind of supporting it, but she said, but don't tell your father, and the father was totally against it. So that was a mess at home. But my question is, I had other students who were more like real rough and tumble boys who would say to him, you're not supposed to do that. That's not what we do. That's not how boys act. Or they would be off in the corner like pointing and giggling. And what is the correct response to that?
Okay. All right. That's one of the reasons we're presenting this, is to help you with that. It's really, one of the responses would be to bring in books and stories about kids who have two moms, or children who are like to cook or like to wear costumes or outfits that don't identify them as that don't express themselves as the biological sex that they are assigned. And there are plenty of those. A little bit further on, we have a slide that has a lot of books that you might want to look at, depending on what your classroom needs, that you could read to the kids or talk to them. Another way to to deal with that is just to ask the child who is being the bully or the tease, why not? Because there's no reason why not. Girls can wear pants. Why can't boys wear dresses?
Yeah, and the thing is, I think the point to make too is, you know, when children act this way, you know, when they break gender expectations, it may be because they have an internal sense of their gender that's different than what they were assigned. It may just be that's what makes them happy right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think the big thing is that, all right. So yeah, the big thing is that, you know, just not like giving them room and a safe space to explore that. You know, it's something that I wish I'd had, you know, when I was growing up, I wish I'd had that sort of freedom and that the language to kind of start to explore that in, you know, in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, the thing is to try to make it a safe space for that child. He or she needs to have a space where they don't feel bullied or challenged in that way by another child. So it's a matter of de-escalating the teasing situation and letting the child who is comfortable in his costumes be comfortable in his costume.
So would you be against any kind of gender norming activities, or, you know, kids that you know, that might be kind of curious? I really don't know what I'm trying to ask, but I guess, like, would you be against gender norming activities?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be against anything that kind of presents that as the norm. You know, I would like to see, you know, activities or stories or whatever that you know, present something other than cisgender heterosexual people all the time. You know, I don't expect every story to have a trans person in it, or every activity to have, you know, gay people in them, or whatever. But I think you know, anything that reinforces heteronormative or cisnormative ideas is probably not going to be, you know, the best approach to take.
Well, I would say make sure that all identities are covered. Not that you need to have every story. I think what Frankie's saying is you don't have to have every story and every activity totally neutral in terms of gender expression or gender identity. But you need to have a reasonable number of alternative stories and alternative activities. For instance, one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute is language, and how to talk and language in the classroom, and how to neutralize language. Okay. Any other questions about this at the moment?
So I don't have a question, but I wanted to share something that I know that I do, and I'm gonna guess probably Nadine does similar things. We're both art teachers in the same school.
Okay.
So I feel like I have a lot of opportunity to, like, for instance, everybody always hears the kids will say, oh, well, pink is a girl color, or, you know, like, so I feel like we have a lot of those opportunities to just kind of remind kids that there aren't any, you know, boy or girl colors. It's just whatever, you know, whatever you want to pick at that time or that moment. You know, if you want the pink background paper, then you go for it. It doesn't matter. Or if they're drawing a portrait and they want, you know, I've had students that boys that want to turn their characters into, you know, princess fairies and stuff like that. And it's like, yes, you go for it, you know, do it. If you want to draw your character with a dress on instead of pants on, then you go for it. And same for girls. So I feel like luckily our curriculum and our subject really, really allows itself to be open in that sort of way. So I think it's, not that I have to toot the arts, but
Yeah, no, that seems like a really wonderful kind of creative space to do that in, and that's great.
Okay.
All right. I think we can move to the next one.
Yeah, I'm gonna, whoop, I hit the wrong
Oh.
one. No, I went the wrong way. Okay, let's talk
There we
language.
go.
Okay. So how is the language that we use helpful to the students, and how might it be hurtful? Okay. One of the things that is helpful is to not gender the kids. Use words like folks or people or
Students.
or everyone, or in terms like that, instead of saying boys and girls. Again, with the boys who want to play in the house area and the girls who want to play with the trains. Reassuring the children those activities are fine for all the students. That it doesn't happen to be that a girl cooks and a boy uses the workshop. There are women carpenters and there are men cooks, some very good ones. How might it be hurtful? Okay, this goes back to what we were talking about dividing the class, to the old idea of let's put the boys on one side and the girls on the other. Not so much with the youngest kids, but middle school kids are often already know that they are not a boy or not a girl as they are assigned. So giving them the option to choose their side is better than automatically assigning their gender.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so by dividing people in that way, you're either misassigning someone or leaving people out entirely, because there are people that are non-binary or genderqueer or gender fluid who don't fit neatly into those binary categories.
What you should, and one thing what is very helpful, especially with older students, is to say your own pronouns. Frankie has she, her on her name. I don't have it on mine, but I am she, her also. In group settings, it's often helpful to share those pronouns, because that indicates to people who are unsure of how the group will accept them, that someone understands that pronouns are important.
And especially for educators who are cisgender themselves, I can say as a trans person, when cis people introduce themselves with their pronouns or include their pronouns in like their email signatures, that's something that I do, and I know a lot of organizations are encouraging their people to do. It normalizes the practice, because there's nothing more uncomfortable than being in a room full of cis people and going around, we all say our pronouns, and I'm thinking to myself, oh geez, are we just doing this because I'm here? So just normalizing that, oh yeah, this is just a way, something else that we say when we introduce ourselves. I'm Frankie, I'm from Oneonta, I use she, her pronouns. Ginny introduces herself the same way, things like that. If everyone does it, then it's normalized.
Yeah, and then you don't get misgendered accidentally.
Exactly.
If your student asks you to use certain pronouns, then you use those pronouns, whether it's he, she, or they, or any of the other pronouns that some students and some people use these days that are not easily spelled, but
yeah, usually called neopronouns. It's kind of one of those things where it's use the terminology that people ask you to in general.
And again, use gender neutral terms when addressing the group, even if it's just you all or everybody, instead of boys and girls. That is really helpful.
I would
everyone.
Yeah, I would also add here too, only use pronouns that they've kind of explicitly said, yeah, these pronouns are okay to use in a group. I know one thing that I had seen was, they did like a questionnaire at the beginning of the school year or whatever, for students, it was like, here's your pronouns. Can I use these pronouns for you in class? Because some students may not be out. Like, you may be aware that, you know, they're questioning their identity or they identify differently, but they might not be out. They may not be comfortable sharing that. So it's important not to accidentally out students as well, or anyone for that matter.
Yes. Yes. No. Yes. That do not out people for whom you are not sure of their out status. Okay, and don't assume someone's gender. Don't assume that a boy is a boy or a girl is a girl just because of the way they are expressing themselves. It's
Yeah.
easy, and you can ask. And ask by using your pronouns and getting their pronouns, then that helps you with that question.
Yeah. And we've already talked about the idea that someone may be expressing themselves one way, but may internally identify another way. You know, we talked about the example with parents, you know, some parents not being supportive and others being more supportive. So they may have reasons for that, and to respect that that is the case. I think we're good with that.
Yeah. Okay, the laws. You will get this when Erin shares the slideshow with you. But in New York State, the state education law prohibits discrimination based on sex in terms of instruction and athletic teams. Okay, and that's DASA specifically provides that no student shall be subjected to harassment by employees or students on school property or at a school function based on a person's actual or perceived race, color, weight, national origin, religion, religious practice, disability, sexual orientation, gender, including gender identity, or sex by school employees or students on a school property or at a school function.
And I'll point out there too that it does say actual or perceived.
Right.
So, you know, if a student's being harassed because other students think they're gay, for instance, that's the same as if they were gay. It's still covered in the same way.
So it includes gender as a protected category and defines gender as a person's actual or I can't see the other side of it.
Or perceived, I think.
So
I think it's actual or perceived.
Or perceived,
I think it's the same language. Yeah.
it includes a person's gender identity or expression. But the identity and the expression being slightly different, as we showed in the genderbread presentation, it includes both of those. Okay. Title IX of the Education Amendment specifically prohibits discrimination in federally funded programs and activities. And there's some guidance recognition, but they continue to change the rules regarding transgender students, which we are not happy about.
Yeah.
Frankie, you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, I would say that that's kind of one of the you know, ongoing debates, if you will, is with the federal government, whether they will or won't choose to protect transgender students in schools, or, you know, or in general for that matter. So yeah, it's I think a point that I would mention here too is when you know, if you have LGBT students in general, but trans students in particular, there is a lot of hate and vilification going on surrounding trans people right now, and to be aware that that's you know, really places a lot of stress on us, and just to respect that that's the case, and kind of, you know, maybe look for clues that someone's having a hard time because of that sort of stuff going on.
Okay. We talked a little about de-escalation techniques. I think the more important thing is to separate the students and to ask specific questions, such as why, you know, why do you think that? Why are you why did you say that to your classmate? And to develop inclusive educational approaches to the not only to the interactions between the students, but to the material and the curriculum that you're sharing with the students.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in general, just kind of challenging, you know, we've talked a lot about this, challenging kind of a lot of the gender norms and things that, you know, a lot of us take as assumptions that don't necessarily have an objective basis in reality.
Okay, here's some links to some legal and support information. GENDA, which is the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act. SONDA is the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. GLSEN, which is, I don't know how to pronounce that.
GLSEN, I think they usually call it GLSEN.
GLSEN, yes, and
Yeah.
Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. That's a really helpful resource. Welcoming Schools has age-appropriate book lists and activities. There's OPA, which is us, the Otsego Pride Alliance, and our website and our Facebook page. A Gender Sexuality Resource Center, which is part of SUNY Oneonta, and the New York State Human Rights Division, which is also a very helpful resource.
Yeah, and just a quick note, GENDA and SONDA are both New York state laws. There is nothing federally that protects people on the basis of gender and sexuality.
I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about what OPA has done and does? I know of the situation in Cooperstown. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing about those kinds of things, but maybe talk a little bit more about what OPA does.
Yeah, so there's a number of things. I mean, the big thing that we do is we do a Pride Fest every year that's open to people of all ages, you know, and functions as a safe place for people to, you know, celebrate who they are and who they love. And additionally, I know Aaron had mentioned that there was a situation in Cooperstown where a student was bullied because there was a perception that the student was gay. I don't even know if that was true or not. It's not really important. But I know a number of us from OPA showed up to the PTA meeting, and I think there was also a school board meeting that a lot of us were involved in, and just kind of advocating for you know, LGBTQ people in the area, and you know, creating activities and spaces where they can you know, feel safe and included and have their voices heard.
And we also have a number of, in a normal year, we have a number of activities. We during the year we have we often do presentations. We have people come in and talk to the group. We have a community meeting every 2 months where everyone is welcome who is interested in what we're doing. We have a family dance where everyone comes. We have a Halloween, usually have a Halloween activity. Of course, this year is a little bit different. But all those activities are posted on particularly on our Facebook page. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let me flip to the next one. Okay, here's the list of book lists for LGBTQ plus inclusiveness. The rainbow book lists are wonderful. They list the new books that come out every year that are LGBT inclusive. So these lists go back to 2008. The BuzzFeed sounds a little silly, but it's actually a really good book list. And then Welcoming Schools has several book lists some are picture books, some are middle grade books, and some are really good teacher reference information.
And I know there's a lot of good, like I guess it'd be in the young adult kind of area of literature. A lot of good stuff that's coming out with you know, queer representation of a lot of different varieties. So, you know, that has improved greatly in recent years.
Yeah, the rainbow book lists include some of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it does.
Yeah, they're pretty extensive. Okay. All right, and the last bit is believe your student when they tell you they're being bullied or have a concern. Be an active listener. Don't presume that you already know what they're going to say. And the confidentiality rules. Frankie, you want to talk about the confidentiality?
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to what I was talking about a little bit with the pronouns, and you know, whether or not it's okay for you to use those pronouns in front of other people and things like that. As we kind of talked about before, we don't want to out anyone, because not just because it may hurt someone's feelings, but it may jeopardize their safety in some cases. You know, we in Oneonta, at least, we're relatively, you know, a lot of us are relatively accepting of you know, people from across the gender and sexuality spectrum, but we know that there are a lot of areas, you know, nearby where people aren't as accepting, and so, you know, it's really a matter of not only of comfort but also of safety. Just allowing the student to tell you who it's acceptable to share, you know, information with. I think one of the things that you know, and this is going to be me talking a little bit as a social work student for a moment, but you know, just allowing people to define themselves, and allowing people to you know, you may be a person whom they feel safe sharing with, and you should take that that responsibility, that trust seriously. And it's one of those things where a violation of that trust could be really hard to mend. So really, like, paying attention to them when they say, like, you know, this is how I feel, but I'm not comfortable having you express that, or having you tell other people that. That's a big deal.
So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that as you're talking to people, before the conversation ends, you will want to ask how much of this is okay to share.
Yeah, and with whom is it okay to share?
Whom? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think going back to the first point on this slide, believing your students, I think it's not just believing that they have been bullied or whatever, but, you know, if they tell you, if they say, you know, I'm a girl, you know, I'm transgender, or I'm gay, or whatever, not imposing your own definitions of those terms on them, believing that they are who they say they are, and respecting that.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that about the confidentiality. If a child has a parent who is anti or does not understand LGBT, it can be very harmful for that child to have that confidentiality leaked out, either from another teacher or from another student. So they are the ones who will tell you who it is acceptable to share information with.
Absolutely.
And again, believe them when they say that.
Do we have tips for how we could broach that conversation? Like, so let's say we have a student that approaches us, engages us in that conversation, and is not really sure how their parents feel about the whole situation. And do we have ways to kind of help the student talk to their parents?
So I think this is always your mileage may vary. Every situation is different kind of thing. But I really think, when having those conversations, what I would do is, let them talk it out, because a lot of times what will happen is they'll be like, well, I don't know how to tell my parents. It's like, okay, well, what are some of your fears when it comes to telling your parents? It's like, then talk about that a little bit. And you're not going to be able to tell them, how to come out to their parents if that's what they decide they want to do. They're going to tell you how they're going to do that. And I think your job is just to kind of give them feedback of yeah, that sounds like a way that maybe, that you could present it to them, or, or whatever. And just kind of allowing them to explore some options in how they want to present it to their parents, if they want to present it to their parents. I think we put a lot of emphasis, we very much celebrate coming out and being out. And that's great, like that. It can be wonderful. It can be really, really liberating, but it's not always, it's not always right for the person. So like really, let them tell you how they want to do it and how they're feeling comfortable doing it. I would not. Whenever someone asks me, because I've had a number of people come to me because they trust me. I'm very out and very open with my identity, and I've had a number of people come to me and they're like, I need to come out to my parents. How do I come out to my parents? I have never once told someone how to come out to their parents. We've talked it over. I've talked about how I came out to my parents, but ultimately I think it's just listening and exploring options, and ultimately they'll come to the best one for them, but letting them do that for themselves, and just affirming them and providing a safe space to explore that.
Anything else? Thank you for joining us, and if you have any other questions, this is a good time. We are over time by a few minutes. So Aaron?
Yeah, I just thought maybe we could do a quick round robin of what you guys got out of it.
Yeah, and maybe if there was if there's any concepts that we need to clear up or whatever, we're happy to do that too, or our own experiences or whatever.
Somebody has a raised hand. I'm not seeing.
That's Nadine.
Okay.
Oh, hi. I was just trying to unmute myself. I pressed star 9 instead of star 6, but I can go first.
Go ahead.
So I think what was really helpful to me with this is kind of knowing how to talk with students without putting words or thoughts into their mouth or into their head. It's sort of being to be able to listen and to not necessarily direct them into what they should do. I think it was very helpful, the conversation about whether a student should come out to their parents or not, or if they can ask what should they do. It's very easy for me as a teacher to want to give students answers sometimes or tell them what to do, but I think just realizing to listen and to kind of help them talk through what they want to do, and realizing that it's their choice and what they want to do, and just kind of being aware of the variety of situations that are at play and that sort of thing. So I think that was very helpful.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad that made sense, because I always feel like when I give that type of answer to a question, people are going to be like, well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? It's like, yeah, we have this tendency to want to fix problems and answer questions. So yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
Somebody has a hand up, is only on the telephone.
Oh, that's Nadine.
Oh, that was me. I'm on both. My sound and my laptop.
Okay.
Very well.
Okay. I've been in meetings where that happens. Anybody else?
Kathleen, Jonathan?
So as a secondary teacher, I was very surprised to learn how young people are when they start to form their identities. And to me, that kind of informed how they're coming already with their own ideas by the time they get up to me in the high school. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And that's a good point. It's like by the time that they're in high school, I already had I didn't have the language for it, but I already had an idea that I was different in some way, and had I had the language, I think I probably would have been, I would have been out, I would have been, who I was. But yeah, it's a really interesting body of research, when they're talking about gender and sexuality for children.
And I think that the more openness that we have in society now enables kids to my experience was that if I had known about being LGBT when I was a child, I would not have had some of the difficult experiences as a teen and that I had. I think that I did what was expected of someone growing up in the 50s and 60s. I'm 70, and I did not come out until I was 50.
Yeah.
I was married, I had a child, and then I won't go into why I came out, but there are a lot of older men and women who did the societally expected thing and got married and raised a family, and it was never the right thing internally.
Yeah.
It was just never the right thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully by reaching out to teachers now and having you being more, having kids, letting kids have that expression now, they will have less problems later and a lot less emotional issues.
I think today really helped me because I've had students in this position. I teach middle school.
Mhm.
And an example is I have a student now in the high school who is referring to herself as a she. But when she talks to me, she still refers to herself as her male name, because when I had her in middle school, and I think this just helped me feel more comfortable to say, if you would prefer me to call you XYZ, what do you want me to do? Because I don't care. I'm comfortable either way. So I guess today was just a reaffirmation for me that it's okay to ask my kids those questions, because obviously she's going through it and I want to support her. The fact that she comes back from high school to talk to me is huge, and we have that connection.
Yeah.
And I'm always worried I'm going to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. But actually that just says that you do care because you want to do the right thing.
I do. And so I think this made me more comfortable to now say, okay, so let's talk about this. You're using your male name with me now because when you were in middle school, you weren't out yet. But I know that you're out now and you prefer your female name. So what would you like me to do? I guess I didn't know if that was an okay question to ask.
Yes, it's an okay question to ask.
Well, and I think that's always the interesting thing, and this is, this has been a constant back and forth for me as people who knew me before I started to transition and everything. How to navigate that. I kind of jokingly have said that it's almost easier for me to deal with strangers who never knew me from before than it is to deal with close friends and family.
No, it's true, because I had a great relationship with this child in middle school, and when I had her, she had not come out yet, and still was going by her male name and her male pronouns. But now that's totally changed. But I don't know if she's not comfortable with me, It's like she comes back to middle school and she feels like she has to go back into who she was. And I just want to be able to support that you need to be who you are at this moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Totally agree.
see what she wants ultimately.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of a unique situation at our school. I just want to bounce this off of all of you, and if you have any input or any advice, that'd be amazing. So we have 2 students that are siblings, and they are, if I'm saying this correctly, they are expressing their gender as female, but they're biologically born male, and they're in like elementary school level, and they also have a parent who is also transitioning. So it's this very interesting situation where I am 100% like supportive of whatever makes you happy, and thankfully they have all the supports in place, as far as I know, that as far as like you know, counselors, doctors, like all the things are in place. But I feel like this is a very unique situation. I mean, you have to have that all going on all at the same time. And I want to be supportive of the students as best I can. And I feel like I have been, but I don't know if that's like, if there's any insight you can shed on that, or if it's just, you know, continue to roll the punches and just be accepting of the individual for, you know, who they are and how they express themselves. And
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you pretty much answered your own question there. I mean, yeah, I would just continue to be supportive of whoever they express themselves to be, and however they decide, you know, like however they decide that they want, you know, they want to be identified or they want to be seen. Yeah, no, I think it is a really interesting situation. It's kind of the amazing diversity of the human experience, right? You know, you do have cases where you know, you have trans parents or, you know, queer parents of some variety, and they're, you know, they end up having you know, trans kids or queer kids of some kind. And you know, it's kind of one of those things where that's cool.
Well, Frankie, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You keep using the term queer.
Yeah.
And that typically has a really negative notation, and it's one of the words I try to avoid at all costs.
Yes. So it's one of those words that in more recent years has kind of been reclaimed. I mean, it was definitely, I agree with you. When I was growing up in the 90s, you know, when I was going to like, you know, I was going to high school in the 90s, it was absolutely a slur. It was not something you wanted to call people. Now, you know, it's kind of been reclaimed. It's kind of been now used as a term to identify yourself. And I kind of see queer as a sort of an umbrella term, you know, a term that kind of refers to a broad range of, you know, gender and sexuality and expression and all of that. And I just kind of use it to talk about anyone who is not cisgender or heterosexual.
Thank you. I respect that, because that is not a term I would ever be comfortable using when dealing with one of my kids, because to me it's still derogatory. So it was just very interesting to hear you use it in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. If that's how someone identifies, you know, I often introduce myself as a queer trans woman. If that's how I identify, you are free to use that term with me, and I think that's kind of a good rule for anywhere. It's not universally a slur anymore. People do use it as an identifier.
Would it be kind of similar to like using the N-word?
I would say I think queer is a word that people who aren't queer can use in the ways that I've kind of talked about. I can't say that is analogous to that word.
Would you say that it would depend on the context? Like I recently had one of my friends on Facebook had commented on a photo, or somebody who was not a friend commented on a friend's post, and they just said queer, and then everybody jumped on that person. Now, if those two people were friends, and it's just like, oh, you're just being queer, you know,
Yeah.
and like, you know, and then they're just whatever. But if they had that relationship, but it was clear that they did not have that kind of relationship where that was appropriate for him to say that in that context.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you said it, context is really important, because the thing is, like, for some people, throwing the term queer at someone is an insult. It is a slur. They are intending it to do harm. But in other cases, it's like, yeah, if I call my friend queer, granted, most of my friends are queer, but you know, that's the thing. But you know, if I use that term in that way, it's not. It doesn't have the same, you know, negative connotation that it would for other people. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's entirely context dependent.
And with my population, because they are middle schoolers, let's be honest, they don't know who they are, what they are. It could change. So I try really hard not to put labels of any kind on them.
Mm-hmm.
Sexuality, or just who am I going to be friends with? What kind of a person am I going to be? They're going through so much. So I try really hard to not use those terms and to let those kids figure out the terms they want to present to me.
Yeah. And the thing is, they've got access to media in a way that I, never did when I was that age. And so like, they're going to find the terms that work best for them. And,
yeah. I mean, I'm so proud of our school because we have a club for them where, they can go to and have support. And it's also straight, quote unquote, kids that just want to support those kids. So I think that's really great. But as a 48-year-old teacher, we didn't use those terms when I went to school.
Yeah.
So I just avoided them.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I definitely used to have a very visceral reaction to the term queer, for example. It was an insult. It was used as an insult against me all the time when I was younger. Queer and other words that I don't really want to use here. But it's definitely one of those things where it took a long time for me being more active in the community before I'm like, queer's a word that works for me, and I am not afraid of that word anymore.
Well, I appreciate you being so honest and answering my question because
absolutely.
You made it very comfortable. And I think it's nice to hear real people who've experienced it. It makes me more comfortable with my kids.
Yeah,
So
that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Anyone else want to make a comment? Okay.
So I will be sending out certificates of participation. We've been doing that with everybody coming to any of our programs. And one of the things we might suggest is you put it out proudly. I'll put like some kind of a rainbow flag behind it or something. And it's just one of those signals to other students that you're actively participating in expanding your knowledge in this area and that you are a safe teacher to come to. And that's what we keep wanting to make sure that kids know, that there's somebody in your building that they can come to, and they'll pick up on those small subtle cues.
That actually is really important to, if you put a little rainbow flag or with the word safe space underneath it or next to it, outside your room, that signals to kids who are trying to figure themselves out that you are a safe space to a safe person to speak to.
Yeah, well, yeah, and this is something that we hadn't even gotten into, but or having little pride flags or whatever,
Yeah, we were supposed to do that, but then the pandemic hit and we ran out of budget money.
Oh yeah.
yeah, but I mean those. Yeah, but those are little signals that you can send to students that they're like, hey, I see you, I support you.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah. All right, I think thank you very much. Appreciate it. And if you have any questions, send them to Aaron and he'll send them on.
Yeah, we're happy to answer anything.
Thank you, everybody. It was really nice. Thanks.
Thank you,
you,
Erin.
everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate
you.
it.